Hello and welcome to Training in the Art of Sexpionage, Week 2, Training number 2, which is part of Die Another Day. What's going to die, you ask? It is your idea of what sexual intimacy should look like in your relationship, and what will be reborn is what sexual intimacy could look like in your relationship. So let's get started. All right, today's training is called Creating a Sexual Vision Statement. Now, our agenda for today's training is to create our sexual manifesto, if you will. Let's ask ourselves some serious questions. Number one, what does the word sex mean to me? Number two, what do I want it to mean for me, my spouse, and our relationship? Number three, do I understand my own power to create the sexual experience I want in my marriage? And number four, how do I do this? That's what we're going to be talking about today. So some of you may have heard me talk about my alter ego. Her name is Monra, Princess of Power and Seduction. I love this alter ego because she is the version of me that I have not yet reached, but I know is possible. She is a sexy and confident, beautiful woman who stands squarely in her power. She knows where her power comes from and how to draw upon it when she needs to. Whenever I need a little bit of extra power and strength or sexiness or something that doesn't necessarily come naturally to me, but I need those characteristics for a particular challenge that I'm facing, I know I can draw upon this alter ego of Monra, and I can step squarely into her power and literally accomplish anything I put my mind to. So my 5-step framework for embracing your identity as a sexual being and using it to bless your marriage is number 1, answering the question, what is a sexual identity? Number 2, accepting and embracing sexuality as part of your wholeness. Number 3, understanding the levels of sexuality. Number 4, unleashing the sexual potential of your marriage. And number 5 is to open up the sexual dialogue with your partner so you can continue to grow and develop together. Now, step 1, what is a sexual identity? This is a difficult question, one we started talking about last week, but it encompasses all these different aspects of how we grow and develop as humans. So our sexual identity is developed through physical expression of pleasure, sensuality, and intimacy, through our healthy relationships, communication, consent, and safety, through environmental influences such as media, technology, and the society we live in. Our sexual identity, which is orientation, gender identity, and our roles, our values and socialization, such as family, friends, peers, culture, and religion, and then reproduction and our sexual health. So all of these things combine together to create what we view as our sexual identity. So once we come to understand and we're able to isolate some of these different factors that have affected how we've developed, how we view ourselves today, and what we want for ourselves in the future, then we can really start to do this work. Step 2 is going to be accepting and embracing our sexuality as part of our wholeness. Now, in order to fully accept and embrace our sexuality, I want us to start by taking that healthy sexual identity assessment from last week so that we can really come to understand who we are as a sexual being, how we got that way, how we see ourselves, and where we're going. Number 2 is to decide which ideas from that we want to reject and which ones we would like to develop more fully. We can educate ourselves and reprogram our mind with healthy sexual messaging. We can welcome positive thoughts and feelings about sex and sexuality and nourish positive feelings towards our spouse. So sometimes, as part of our sexual identity, we learn that something about our spouse or the way that our spouse is developed may be negative or not ideal, but we have all the power in the world to nourish positive feelings towards our spouse. And I invite you to do that. One of the ways that I invite you to really start exploring your own sexual identity is by starting a sexual self-discovery journal. Now, this is a private place just for you to start writing down your feelings, emotions, opinions, and all of your ideas about sex and sexuality, and a place where you can grow and experiment and learn and do those brain dumps like we talked about, so that you can really just have a place to not judge and not edit yourself, but just grow and develop. And writing is so therapeutic as we do this. And then what I want you to remember most importantly is that this work is something that you do for yourself first, and then to enrich your relationship with your spouse, not the other way around. If you're in it just for your spouse, then you're missing a very key component of developing your own sexual identity. So I want your main motivation to be to do this for yourself and then to enrich your relationship with your spouse. Number 3 is understanding the levels of sexuality. Now, this is adapted from Laura Brotherson in her book, Knowing Her Intimately, but she talks about the different levels of sexuality being level 1, having sex mostly to meet your spouse's needs. Sometimes it's called duty or charity sex. Your body is involved, but your heart and your mind are not. And if you can muster up a civil attitude, you mostly have a negative mindset about it. That's level 1. Level 2 sexuality is still having sex to meet your partner's needs, but you're more emotionally engaged. You're also motivated by a desire to be a good spouse and as a genuine expression of love, which is a definite improvement. And your willing participation in some mutual enjoyment and pleasure is involved. Now that's level 2, but level 3 sexuality, which is what we're shooting for, is true, enthusiastic, shared lovemaking for both partners' benefit in order to feel more whole, alive, and complete. Your hunger from sex comes from a place of fully embracing your God-given sexuality and your sexual self. Sex is motivated by a genuine desire to connect completely with your spouse, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. It comes from a place of safety and secure attachment to your spouse, coming from a place of wholeness as a true oneness of body and soul. Sex is a place for giving, receiving, sharing, and fully experiencing each other. And once we get to the level of sexuality that we want to be at, step 4 is to unleash the sexual potential of your marriage. Sexual intimacy is as important for the health and vitality of your marriage as is emotional closeness and spiritual connection. They all work hand in hand. Cultivating your sexual potential in marriage leads to a greater overall mental, emotional, and physical health, as well as a greater happiness and wholeness. Now, remember that each couple's sexual dynamic is as important and diverse as there are couples in the world. There is no two sexual dynamics that are the same. I can guarantee you that. You and only you have the power to create your own world within your marriage where anything is possible and everything is as you imagine it. You can design your sexual dynamic to cultivate growth, development, creativity, and anything else you truly desire. Sex is truly the power to create. It's the power to create anything you can imagine. And once you understand that, step 5 is to open up a sexual dialogue with your partner. Now, I'm going to suggest some sexual conversation starters. May I suggest that you ask yourselves questions like, what are 3 of your favorite things about lovemaking? What are 3 things that you like least about sex? What do you remember about our first sexual encounter? What misconceptions did you have about sex before we got married? On a scale of 0 to 10, how important is non-sexual touch and affection to you and our relationship? What kinds of things do you like me to say during lovemaking? What does sex mean to you? And what is something you think might be fun to try sometimes? These are just conversation starters, but so important to talk through as you are creating the sexual dynamic in your relationship. It's important to talk both to teach and to learn. So you are teaching your partner about your thoughts and opinions, as well as learning about theirs. I want you to set a time each week to have these important conversations and listen to understand each other. Now, understanding each other is the goal, but I want to promise you that you will never fully understand your spouse. The reason they say things like men are from Mars and women are from Venus is because we're 2 completely different animals and we think differently. We're different humans. And so you're never going to fully understand your spouse, but you can listen to try and gain insight and understanding into who they are and how they feel about things, as long as you can be vulnerable, open, and curious and suspend judgment in order to create a safe space for both of you to grow and develop and discover. That is what makes marriages passionate and enjoyable. When you understand that you think differently, that you act differently, that you've developed differently, and that your thoughts and ideas will be different. And that's what makes life exciting. Now, I want to tell you about Elizabeth and George. This is a couple that I had the opportunity to work with for about 6 months, and I love them. Now, Elizabeth grew up in a very conservative religious household where there was a lot of shame and secrecy around sexuality. George grew up in a home where sex wasn't talked about at all. He learned about sex mostly from his friends and from pornography. When the 2 of them got married, they had a really hard time understanding their own sexuality, so their sex life was a huge challenge for them. We worked together for 6 months to nourish and develop their individual sexuality and create a sexual dynamic between the 2 of them that worked really well for both of them. Now, you don't have to work with me for 6 months to be able to do this. It's not hard. What I just went through is how you come to terms with your sexual identity. You examine your thoughts, your programming, and your conditioning about sex. And then you choose to reject what doesn't serve you and develop what does. And then you work with your partner to create a sexual dynamic that works beautifully for the both of you. Putting this all together, emotional plus physical intimacy. Our emotional training was about telling the story you want to be remembered for. If the story that you're telling yourself is causing you either not to be proud of the story or not to show up in your marriage as you want, we talked about how you can change and rewrite that story to make it where you are proud to be the main character and that you're showing up the way you want to show up. This is the same in your emotional as in your sexual relationship. So how do we create our unique sexual dynamic in our marriage? First is that we open up that dialogue and discuss our wants, needs, and desires around the sexual dynamic of our relationship. Number 2 is that we create a sexual vision statement. What do we want sex to mean in our relationship? That's your assignment for this training. Number 3 is really important, so I bolded it. I want you guys to develop a yes, no, and maybe list. So you're going to do this separately. If you're working on your own, then you would do your own. If you're doing this together, then I want you to create these lists separately. What would go on your yes list is anything sexual that you for sure would like to try. You can put on there things that you already do or things that interest you and you would like to try them. Your no list is things that make you absolutely completely uncomfortable and you are not willing to try them. And your maybe list are things that maybe are from your spouse's interest list that you hadn't thought about before, but you might be open to trying. You might not be super comfortable with them now, but you think that maybe you would be comfortable with them in the future. Once you've created this sexual vision statement and decided what you want sex to mean in your relationship, and you've developed your individual yes, no, maybe lists, you've discussed them and put them together, then I want you to revisit both of these things regularly. So if you're just getting started, you may want to revisit them more often, like monthly. If you feel comfortable with what you've created, then maybe you can go 6 months or even each year on your anniversary. But I want you to for sure set a time where you're going to revisit both your vision statement and your yes, no, maybe lists. Because as you continue to grow and develop and nurture your sexuality and your sexual dynamic, these things will change. Now, I want you to remember, most importantly, to get vulnerable and curious and enjoy learning about yourself, your spouse, and your sexual dynamic. The only way this will work is if you come from a place of curiosity and vulnerability, that you do not judge, and that you create a safe and open place for both of you to grow and develop individually and together. You may have to draw upon the power of your alter ego in order to get through some of these assignments. It's not an easy thing. It's definitely a difficult topic, but I promise it's so worth developing this part of your relationship. Once you make those yes, no, maybe lists, it's time to maybe get a little bit brave for the sake of yourself and your personal development as well as your relationship. So congratulations, special agents. Operation Tell Your Story and Create Your Sexual Dynamic Mission Training Week 2 is complete. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to complete the homework pages for both these trainings, rewriting your story, and then deciding what sex means to you. Your action item mission for week 2 is to create a sexual vision statement. You can do this on your own or with your partner, but decide what you want sexual intimacy to mean for you as a couple. Be sure to create those yes, no, maybe lists, and then set up a regular scheduled time to revisit both your mission statement and those lists. This can be monthly, annual, or biannual, but make sure that you are regularly revisiting these two important aspects of your relationship as you grow and develop individually and together as a couple. Congratulations. Once you've completed your second mission, I hope that you'll return and report in the Facebook group and let us know that you completed mission number 2. And I will see you for week 3, mission 3, very shortly. Bye for now.